She was dining alone on Valentine's Day until a CEO sat down with a rose and a proposal. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. She was having dinner alone on Valentine's Day when a man she had never met before, a CEO in a charcoal suit, appeared beside her table, holding a single red rose. The restaurant was glowing in soft amber light, every table set with candles and wine glasses that caught the flicker like tiny stars. Couples leaned close, laughing quietly over shared desserts, but at table 9, she sat alone. Emily Hart, 26, an art teacher recently laid off when her school closed. She had promised herself that being alone would not break her. Not tonight. She pushed the pasta around her plate, pretending not to notice the empty chair across from her. Then came the voice. Deep. Calm. Excuse me, is this seat taken? Emily looked up, startled. The man standing before her looked straight out of a magazine's sharp jaw, calm gray eyes, the faintest trace of rain on his coat. He carried a single rose like it was an afterthought, yet his presence made the air change around him. Oh, I am waiting for no one, she said softly. Please go ahead. He smiled, the kind that felt practiced yet somehow sincere. Perfect, he said, sliding into the chair opposite her. I am Ethan Ward. She blinked. I am sorry. Are you sure you have the right table? I do, he replied simply, placing the rose on the tablecloth. Actually, I was hoping to talk to you. Her fork paused midair. Me? We have not met before. It nodded as see. I know, he said, leaning forward slightly. And this will sound strange, but I have a proposal. Emily let out a nervous laugh. I think that is the fastest proposal in history. His lips twitched. Not that kind of proposal. A contract. She frowned. A contract? Ethan reached into his briefcase and placed a small folder on the table. The folder looked completely out of place next to the wine and candlelight. I need a fiancé, he said quietly. For 30 days. For a moment, the sound of the restaurant faded. She thought she had misheard him. You need a what? A fiancé. It is business. My company is finalizing a merger, and my board expects me to appear. Settled. He met her gaze. I can offer compensation. More than enough to solve your financial problems. Her pulse stuttered. You do not even know me. I know you lost your job. I know your landlord gave you an eviction notice. And I know you are someone who does not like to owe anyone. Emily's breath caught. How do you? I do my research, he said, his tone calm but not unkind. I saw you at the community center art class last week. You gave away your last set of paintbrushes to a kid who could not afford them. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks. You were there? He nodded. That is how I knew. You are kind, but you need help. I can help you, and you can help me. It not his their eye and dap. Severn was wild. Emily stared at him, her mind spinning. Around them, couples laughed and waiters poured wine. Somewhere in the background, a love song played too softly to distract from the tension between them. You are serious, she whispered. Completely. What happens after 30 days? Ethan's eyes softened for the first time. After that, you go back to your life, free and clear. I will make sure you never worry about money again. She looked down at the rose lying between them. Its petals glowed in the candlelight, beautiful, fragile, almost unreal. Why me? Because, he said quietly, you do not want anything from me. That is exactly what I need. Not self. Emily exhaled, torn between disbelief and the desperate weight of reality. The bills on her counter, the eviction notice, her mother's hospital fees all flashed before her eyes. Let me think about it, she said at last. Of course, Ethan replied, his voice low, controlled. He stood, leaving the rose behind. Take your time, but not too long. As he walked away, the scent of rain and cedar lingered. Emily stared at the flower, her heart pounding. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and soundless against the restaurant window. Somewhere deep down, she already knew whatever choice she made tonight would change everything. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of rain tapping against her apartment window. Her tiny one-bedroom looked even smaller in the gray light. A pile of unpaid bills sat on the table, next to a cold cup of coffee. She rubbed her temples, remembering the night before the candlelight, the rose, and the stranger who had offered her a contract instead of a date. She told herself it had to be some kind of prank. No one, especially not a man like Ethan Ward, would walk up to a stranger and offer something so impossible. Yet when she opened her phone, there it was, an email from E. Ward, Ward Technologies. Subject: proposal, follow-up. Message: take your time. My driver can pick you up at 3 p.m. if you wish to discuss details. Her stomach twisted. It was not a prank. By 3 o'clock, she found herself standing on the sidewalk under a shared umbrella, staring at the sleek black car parked in front of her building. A man in a dark coat stepped out and opened the door. Miss Hart, Mr. Ward is expecting you. Inside the car, leather seats and quiet jazz made her feel even more out of place. She fidgeted with her hands the entire drive. When they pulled up in front of a tall glass building downtown, she could see her reflection in the window, hair damp from the rain, coat a little too worn, face pale but determined. Ethan was waiting for her in a private conference room on the top floor. He looked the same as before, calm and unreadable, a cup of black coffee resting on the table beside a thin folder. Emily, he greeted, standing as she entered. I appreciate that you came. I am still not sure why I did, she admitted, sitting across from him. That is fair. He opened the folder and slid a set of papers toward her. Here are the terms. The first page read, Temporary Engagement Agreement. Her breath caught as she skimmed the clauses. Asterisk duration, 30 days. Asterisk appear together in 5 public events. Asterisk maintain the image of a genuine relationship. Asterisk no personal interference in each other's private lives. Asterisk confidentiality is required. At the bottom, in crisp ink, was his signature. Emily looked up. This is insane. You really live your life by contracts, do you not? Ethan's lips curved faintly. It keeps things clear. And if I refuse, then you walk away. No harm done. He leaned back slightly. But if you accept, I will transfer enough to clear all your debts and fund your mother's treatment. I know you have been paying for her physical therapy. Her heart stopped for a beat. You looked into my mother? I look into everything, he said simply. That is how I survive. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside blurred the city skyline into silver streaks. Finally, Emily said softly, This is not love. I know. It is business. Exactly. She took a slow breath, her fingers brushing the pen on the table. And what if people find out? Then I will protect you, Ethan said, his tone steady. That is part of the deal. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to quiet the storm inside her chest. Every practical part of her screamed to say no, but the truth was she had run out of practical options. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the rose from last night lying beside the folder, its petals still red and perfect. Emily picked up the pen, her hand trembling just enough for him to notice. 30 days, she whispered. That is all. Ethan nodded once. 30 days. The sound of her signature filled the silence, one long, final stroke of ink that sealed a deal neither of them fully understood. When she looked up, Ethan was watching her carefully, his expression unreadable. Welcome to the arrangement, Miss Hart. Outside the window, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the city, heavy, uncertain, and waiting to break again. 2 days later, Emily stood in front of a mirror inside an elegant dressing suite, her reflection so unfamiliar that she barely recognized herself. A stylist pinned her hair into a sleek twist, while another adjusted the hem of a soft ivory dress that shimmered under the warm lights. Around her, assistants moved quickly, murmuring about schedules and photo angles. It was her first public appearance as Ethan Ward's fiancée. She had agreed to attend a charity gala that evening, one of the 5 public events written in the contract. The reality of it all hit her only now, surrounded by strangers who treated her like she belonged to another world. When Ethan entered the room, the chatter stopped. He wore a black suit that looked effortless, the kind of perfection that came from both money and control. He scanned her from head to toe, his expression unreadable. You look presentable, he said finally, but there was a trace of something softer behind the formality. Emily managed a nervous smile. That is high praise coming from you. Do not let anyone see that you are nervous, he reminded her. At this level, confidence is everything. Confidence or pretending you have it? Ethan's mouth twitched. Pretending works until the real thing catches up. Hours later, the two stepped out of a sleek black car and into a sea of flashing cameras. The ballroom entrance glittered with golden chandeliers, and reporters called out Ethan's name. He placed a steady hand on Emily's back, guiding her through the crowd. The touch was light but grounding. Inside, music floated through the air. The tables were lined with crystal glasses and towering flower arrangements. Emily felt every eye on her as they took their seats near the front. Her pulse raced, but she kept her chin lifted, just as the etiquette coach had instructed. A woman in a red gown leaned over from the next table, smiling too sweetly. "So, this is the mystery fiancé we have heard so much about," she said. "You move quickly, Ethan." Emily forced a polite smile. "Sometimes life surprises us," the woman laughed. "Indeed. I just hope you know what you are getting into." And then, Ethan's hand tightened slightly over Emily's. "She does," he said coolly, ending the conversation. For a moment their eyes met. There was something protective in his gaze, something that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. As dinner was served, Emily found herself relaxing bit by bit. She could play this part. Smile, listen, speak when spoken to. Every time she stumbled, Ethan quietly covered for her, steering the conversation with effortless charm. When the host announced Ethan as a major donor, the crowd applauded. Cameras turned toward their table, and without warning, Ethan reached for her hand. "Smile," he whispered. She did. The flashbulbs went off, freezing the image of them together, his calm confidence beside her fragile grace. Later that night, as the guests began to leave, Emily slipped outside for a moment of air. The night was cool, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. She let out a slow breath, feeling both exhilarated and exhausted. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Ethan appeared, his tie slightly loosened. "You handled yourself well," he said. "I almost dropped the glass during the toast," she admitted. "But you did not. That is what matters." She smiled faintly. "I thought you said this was all just business." "It is," he replied, though his voice carried a note she could not quite name. "But you are learning fast." For a second, neither of them spoke. The sound of distant traffic filled the silence. Then Ethan looked at her, his tone softening. "Tomorrow we will go over the schedule for the next event. Try to get some rest, Emily." He turned to leave, but she caught herself watching him walk away, the way his shoulders stayed straight even when his eyes looked tired. Something about him did not match the ruthless image she had expected. And as she stood under the city lights, holding the rose-colored clutch he had chosen for her, she wondered what else about Ethan Ward was real and what was just part of the act they both agreed to live in. The next few days passed in a blur of lessons and rehearsals. Emily found herself living inside a world that did not feel real. Tailors arriving at dawn, stylists correcting the smallest detail of her posture, and etiquette tutors drilling her on how to speak at a press dinner without sounding nervous. Every moment was measured, every smile rehearsed. Ethan had built an empire on precision, and now he was shaping her the same way into someone who could stand beside him without cracking under the flash of a camera. "This is not acting," his assistant had told her once. "This is survival at the top." Emily repeated those words to herself whenever she felt out of place. But it was not easy. Each time she looked into the mirror, she saw less of the woman she used to be. The art teacher who painted on weekends, the daughter who used to bring laughter into her mother's small apartment, those parts of her felt like they were fading into the background. One afternoon, she walked into the main office where Ethan was finishing a meeting. The room was all glass and steel, overlooking the skyline. He dismissed his team with a nod before turning to her. "You are early," he said. "I needed to talk to you." He raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "I want to add one more condition to the contract," she said, crossing her arms. Ethan leaned back in his chair, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "And what would that be?" "No more personal investigations. No calls to my landlord. No digging into my mother's clinic. No surprises. If we are going to pretend, let it stay pretend." He studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Fair enough, but you should know that my world runs on control. I do not like uncertainty." "Neither do I," she said quietly. "But sometimes you have to live with it." A silence stretched between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Ethan finally stood and walked to the window, his reflection blending with the silver light outside. You are different from the people I usually deal with, he admitted. They want something. You just want to keep your dignity. Emily's lips curved slightly. Maybe that is the one thing I can still afford. That evening, they attended a small dinner with potential investors. This time, Emily wore a navy gown that shimmered with each movement, and for the first time, she felt like she could breathe among the high society crowd. She laughed when appropriate, asked clever questions, and even teased Ethan once when he called her Miss Hart too formally in front of others. The investors loved her. After dinner, one of them told Ethan, "She is remarkable, you chose well." Ethan only smiled, but later, in the car ride home, he said quietly, "You surprised me tonight. It is lady inaudible. Is that good or bad?" "It is good," he said, glancing at her. "You handled them better than I expected." "Maybe I am learning to fake confidence," she replied with a small grin. "Or maybe it is not fake anymore." The city lights flickered through the window, washing his face in alternating gold and shadow. For the first time, she noticed how tired he looked when he was not performing for the world. The sharp edges in his expressions softened. "Ethan," she said after a moment, "why do you always keep everyone at a distance?" He hesitated. "Because closeness has a cost, and I am not sure I can afford it again." Zeris, the write down. His voice was quiet, but there was a weight behind it that told her not to ask more. She turned toward the window, the glow of the city painting her reflection beside his. Two strangers bound by a contract, learning to play a part, yet somewhere between the lies and the rules, something unspoken had begun to change, something that neither of them had planned for, but both could already feel growing in the silence. By the end of the third week, the act had become routine. Emily and Ethan moved through public events with practiced precision smiles for the cameras, soft gestures of affection, and perfectly timed laughter that fooled even the sharpest reporters. What had started as a business arrangement was now a carefully choreographed performance. That night, they attended a corporate fundraiser at one of the city's grand hotels. Crystal chandeliers glowed above them, and the sound of violins floated through the air. Emily wore a deep green gown that caught the light like emerald silk. Ethan stood beside her in his tailored tuxedo, his hand resting lightly on her back. "You will be fine," he whispered as the cameras turned toward them. "Just remember, we are the perfect couple." She forced a steady smile. "I am starting to believe it myself." Inside, the ballroom glittered with the city's elite. Laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses. Ethan led her to the front, where members of his board and several journalists waited. Emily could feel the weight of every stare, but she kept her composure. Midway through dinner, a reporter leaned across the table. "Miss Hart," he said smoothly, "everyone has been wondering how you two met. It is quite the fairy tale." Emily froze for half a second. Then she smiled and answered, "It was not a fairy tale. Just unexpected. He found me when I least expected anyone would." The table erupted in light laughter, but Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. She had spoken the truth, even if no one there knew it. Later, as the evening unfolded, the host announced that Ethan Ward would be presenting a major donation to the city's Children's Art Foundation. When Emily heard the name of the organization, her breath caught. It was the same small charity where she used to teach art classes before losing her job. As Ethan stepped onto the stage, he glanced at her. "I thought it would be meaningful," he said softly before walking up to the microphone. Her eyes followed him, heart swelling with something she could not name. He spoke about opportunity, about giving children a chance to express themselves. His tone was calm but genuine, and for the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man behind the business armor. When the applause filled the room, Ethan returned to their table. Emily leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for choosing that foundation." He looked at her with quiet sincerity. "I remembered you said it mattered to you." Their eyes met for a long moment, and something shifted, something deeper than their rehearsed smiles or scripted affection. But just as the warmth settled between them, a voice cut through the music. "Well, this is a surprise." Emily turned to see a woman in a sleek red dress approaching their table. Her tone dripped with confidence, and her gaze locked on Ethan. Ethan Ward, always full of surprises. And this must be the famous fiancé. Ethan stood slowly. "Vanessa," he said, his voice tightening. "This is not the time." "Oh, I think it is," she said sweetly. "You did not tell me you had moved on so quickly after ending our engagement." Emily felt the color drain from her face. Murmurs rippled through the nearby tables. Cameras began to lift. Ethan's jaw clenched. "That chapter is closed," he said firmly. "Please leave it that way." But the damage was already done. The crowd had caught every word, and whispers began spreading like smoke. Ethan turned to Emily, his eyes dark with frustration and something that looked almost like regret. "We should go." She nodded silently, following him through the crowd as the flash of cameras burst behind them. In the car, the silence was suffocating. The rain had begun again, streaking down the windows. Emily stared at the city lights blurring past, her heart aching in a way she could not explain. "It was bound to happen," Ethan said quietly. "People like Vanessa live to start fires." She swallowed hard. "It is fine. I knew this was not real anyway." But the words hurt more than she expected. Ethan looked at her, his voice softer now. "It does not have to stay fake." Emily turned away, her chest tightening. The city lights flickered across her face as she whispered, "Yes, it does." That was the deal, remember? And for the first time, Ethan did not have an answer. The next evening, the city was quieter than usual. The storm from the night before had washed the streets clean, leaving reflections of neon and streetlights shimmering across the wet pavement. Inside Ethan's penthouse, the air was still. The silence between him and Emily had stretched since the gala long enough to feel like a wall neither wanted to climb. Emily stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. The city sparkled like a field of stars, but all she could think about were the whispers from the crowd, the cameras flashing, and that woman's voice, Vanessa. Behind her, Ethan poured himself a drink, the sound of ice clinking in the glass, breaking the heavy quiet. "You have not said much since last night," he said finally. "What is there to say?" Emily asked softly. "Your ex-fiancé humiliated you in front of half the city, and I was the collateral damage." He turned toward her, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "You handled it better than anyone could have. You did not run." "I wanted to," she admitted, "but I signed a contract. I do not break promises." Ethan set the glass down, his gaze softening. "That is not the only reason you stayed." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "It is Marg-backed." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion behind his composed mask. "You stayed because somewhere between pretending and performing, this stopped feeling fake for you. Tell me I am wrong." Emily's heart thudded painfully. She wanted to argue, but the truth hovered between them, undeniable. "You should not say things like that," she whispered. "This is dangerous." "I have built my life on danger," he said quietly. "But this what I feel when I look at you is different." The words hung in the air, heavy and honest. Emily turned away, her pulse racing. "You do not even know who I am outside of this act. You know what I wear, how I smile, what I am supposed to say, but you do not know me." Ethan took another step forward. "Then tell me, help me know you." Her voice trembled. "You would not understand. My world does not fit into yours. I spent my life working 2 jobs, fighting to keep my mother's health stable, and painting in a corner when I could not afford sleep. I do not belong here, Ethan. Not in this place. Not in your life." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe you belong here more than anyone else I have ever met." The words struck deeper than she wanted them to. She blinked back, sudden tears shaking her head. "You are saying that because you are lonely." He hesitated, then admitted, "Maybe I am." In Rightum South Side and Never Dan, the confession hung in the stillness. For once there was no pretense, just two people stripped of everything that made them appear strong. Ethan turned toward the window, his reflection beside hers. "When my father died, I was 24. The company fell on my shoulders overnight. I learned that love and business could not coexist. Every time I let someone close, they wanted something from me." He paused, his voice rougher now. "Until you." Emily stared at him, her chest tightening. "Ethan." He met her gaze again, the distance between them shrinking. "You can call me heartless, calculated, whatever you want, but what I said last night, I meant it. It does not have to stay fake." The 60 all bros it in plain. Her eyes flickered with something like hope, but she quickly looked away. "Even if I wanted to believe that, the world would not. They saw what happened at the gala. They already think I am pretending." "Then let them think," Ethan said, his tone low but steady. "I am done pretending. For a moment, she wanted to reach for him to close the gap between the man she had agreed to marry for convenience and the one who was now standing in front of her, stripped of every wall. But before she could speak, his phone buzzed sharply on the counter. He glanced at it, his expression shifting from warmth to something colder. "It is the board," he said. His tone clipped. "They want to meet tomorrow. The news from the gala is spreading." Emily's stomach sank. "They think I am a distraction, do they not?" Ethan looked at her, jaw tightening. "They think you are a mistake." She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Then maybe it is time to remind them who signed the contract." Ethan met her eyes again, a spark of determination flickering beneath the tension. "No," he said firmly. "It is time to remind them who I really am." And for the first time, Emily wondered which version of Ethan Ward she was truly falling for, the powerful CEO or the man who had just admitted he was tired of being alone. The following morning, Emily woke to a dozen missed calls and a flood of messages. News outlets had already twisted the gala incident into headlines. Ethan Ward's fiancée exposed as gold digger, and corporate scandal or staged romance. Her name was everywhere. She sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room of Ethan's penthouse, her heart pounding as she scrolled through the articles. Photos from the gala flashed across the screen. Ethan on stage, her standing beside him, and Vanessa smiling just seconds before chaos erupted. The captions were cruel. The comments even worse. A knock sounded at the door. Ethan stood there, his tie loose, his phone still in his hand. He looked like he had not slept. "You saw it," he said quietly. She nodded, setting the phone down. "They are tearing me apart." "I am handling it," he said, but his voice carried more frustration than confidence. "Handling it? You cannot control gossip, Ethan. People already made up their minds. I can control what happens next," he said sharply, then sighed, rubbing his temple. "The board called an emergency meeting this morning. They want answers. They think the engagement is hurting the company." Emily's stomach sank. "And what are you going to tell them?" "The truth," he said, "that none of this affects business." "Or the truth," she asked softly, "that this entire relationship started as a lie? That money deceived Wand." He looked at her, and for the first time, there was a flash of uncertainty in his eyes. "If they find out about the contract, they will remove me as CEO. It will destroy everything I have built." "And what about me?" Emily's voice trembled. "I have nothing left to lose, Ethan. You have everything. That is the difference between us." He opened his mouth to speak, but the phone rang again. He turned away to answer, pacing as he listened. When he hung up, his expression had hardened. "They want you there too. Noon. They say if you are truly my fiancé, you should have no problem proving it." Emily's pulse raced. "You mean they want to interrogate me?" "They want to test you," Ethan said. "They think you are after my money." She gave a hollow laugh. "Then maybe you should tell them the truth, that you are the one who offered me money." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Emily?" She cut him off, her eyes glistening. "You think you can fix this with charm or strategy, but this is not a boardroom. These are people's lives, mine included." He stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Let me protect you." She shook her head. "You cannot protect me from something that never should have started this way." When noon came, they arrived together at the company headquarters. The boardroom was vast, lined with glass walls and long shadows. The directors sat in a row, their expressions unreadable. Ethan began calmly, explaining the media distortion, the charity event, the engagement. But halfway through, one of the senior members interrupted. "Mr. Ward, forgive us, but this is not about the press. It is about your judgment. You expect us to believe you fell in love overnight with a woman who has no background, no social record, no family wealth?" The words sliced through the air like a blade. Emily straightened her back, her hands folded tightly on her lap. "You do not have to believe that," she said clearly. "You just have to believe that he treats people with respect, even when they come from nothing." The room went silent. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. The chairman leaned forward. "Ms. Hart, we appreciate your composure, but this situation is a liability. If you truly care about this company and about Mr. Ward, you will do the right thing." Emily felt the meaning behind his words. The right thing meant leaving. She turned to Ethan, her heart aching. "Maybe they are right," she whispered. "Maybe walking away is the only way to save what you have." Ethan reached for her hand under the table, his grip tight, desperate. "Do not do this," he said quietly. Not like this. But Emily could already feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I told you, Ethan, I do not break promises. But I also do not destroy people to keep them. She stood slowly, her voice trembling but firm. Thank you for giving me a way out. I think our contract has served its purpose. The room was dead silent as she walked to the door, the echo of her heels marking the end of the arrangement that had started as business and somehow turned into something real. Behind her, Ethan sat motionless, staring at the rose gold ring, still resting on the table, a symbol of everything he had gained and lost in the same breath. 3 days had passed since Emily walked out of the boardroom. The headlines had already moved on to fresher scandals, but the silence left in her life was deafening. She had packed her few belongings, left the penthouse key on the marble counter, and moved back into her small apartment near the edge of the city. The rose Ethan had once given her still sat in a glass jar on the windowsill, its petals beginning to dry and curl. She thought that after leaving, she would feel relief. Instead, every quiet moment reminded her of the way Ethan had looked at her when she walked away like a man watching his world fall apart in slow motion. On the fourth evening, as she was cleaning brushes and preparing a small set of sketches for the community art center, her phone buzzed. It was an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Please come to the Carter Foundation tomorrow at noon." There was no signature, but she knew exactly who had sent it. The next day, curiosity and an ache she could not name brought her there. The Carter Foundation building gleamed in the sunlight, a mix of glass and white stone. Inside, the receptionist smiled gently and led her to a private exhibition room. When the doors opened, Emily froze. The entire space was filled with her paintings, every piece she had ever sold, donated, or abandoned. Framed and hung in perfect symmetry, the walls bloomed with color and life. At the center stood Ethan, wearing a dark suit, a single rose in his hand. Her voice trembled. "How did you find all of these?" He stepped closer. "I never stopped looking after you left. I called every gallery, every collector, every person who had ever owned your work. You once told me you painted because it made you feel seen. I wanted to make sure the world saw you too." Her eyes burned with tears. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I should have protected you," he said softly. "I should have told the truth to the board, to the world, and to you. The contract, the arrangement, all of it, it was never about control. It was about fear. I was afraid to trust someone again." Emily shook her head, her heart pounding. "You do not owe me this." "I do," he said firmly, "because you walked away to save me, even when it cost you everything. That is not something I can repay with money or power. The only way I can make it right is by being honest." He took a deep breath, then raised the rose slightly. "This exhibit is called The Art of Emily Hart. It opens tonight under your name. No mention of me, no pretense, no contract. Just you." Emily covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Ethan, you did not have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "I wanted to show you what love looks like when it is real. No deals, no signatures, no board meetings. Just truth." For a long moment they stood there, surrounded by the soft glow of her art. The colors reflected across the polished floor, washing over them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Ethan extended his hand, the rose still between his fingers. "I cannot ask you to trust me again, but if there is even a chance, just one, that we could start over, I am willing to earn it." Emily looked at him, her heart twisting between disbelief and hope. "You think people will forget what happened?" He shook his head. "They do not have to. I am not hiding anymore. Let them talk. Let them see the truth." The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the lights and the faint sound of the city beyond the glass. Then Emily stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She took the rose, her fingers brushing his. 30 days, she whispered. "That is how it started." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Then maybe forever is how it ends." For the first time since their paths had crossed, there was no performance, no camera, no script, just two people standing in the middle of what had once been a contract and was now something entirely real. The evening of the exhibition arrived, and the city buzzed with anticipation. Outside the Carter Foundation, flashes from cameras painted streaks of light across the marble steps. Guests filed in one by one, critics, collectors, journalists, all drawn by the promise of a mysterious new artist whose name had suddenly appeared everywhere. Emily Hart. Inside, the room glowed beneath soft golden light. The paintings shimmered in rich shades of red, blue, and gold. Snapshots of ordinary life made extraordinary through color. Near the center stood the piece that drew everyone in, a portrait of a single rose resting on a folded sheet of paper titled The Contract. Emily stood near the edge of the crowd wearing a simple champagne-colored dress. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were bright. For the first time, she was there not as someone's companion or as a rumor in the news. She was there as herself. When she saw Ethan across the room, speaking with a few investors, her breath caught. He was no longer the polished, unreadable CEO she had met weeks ago. There was something human in the way he smiled, now less armor, more warmth. As the speeches began, the curator introduced her to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome the artist whose work reminds us that courage and compassion can exist even in the harshest worlds, Miss Emily Hart." Applause filled the hall. Emily took a step forward, the sound washing over her. She met Ethan's eyes in the crowd, and for a moment, it felt like the world slowed around them. She began to speak softly but clearly. "Every painting in this room was born from struggle, from trying to hold on to hope when life said there was none. But this collection would not exist without someone who reminded me that kindness is not weakness, and that love, real love, is never a transaction." The crowd listened in silence. Emily smiled faintly. "So tonight, I dedicate this exhibition to the idea that we can begin again, no matter how broken we are." The applause rose again, but her gaze never left Ethan's. He was already moving through the crowd toward her. When he reached her, he stopped just a few feet away. "You were incredible," he said quietly. She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "You gave me a chance to stand again. That is what incredible looks like." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, the light caught a simple diamond ring, elegant and understated, just like her. "This time," Ethan said, his voice steady, "there is no contract, no clause, no conditions, only a promise." A hush fell over the room. The guests turned to watch as Emily's hand rose to her lips. "Ethan," she whispered. He took her hand gently. "I fell in love with you when you were pretending to be mine. But I am asking now, will you be mine for real?" Tears filled her eyes as the room blurred around her. "Yes," she breathed, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, I will." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, but neither of them noticed. In that moment, there was no audience, no press, no performance, just the quiet heartbeat between them. Later, when the hall had emptied and the lights dimmed, Emily stood beside him, looking at the rose still displayed beneath her painting. Its petals had begun to fade, turning from deep red to soft pink. "Roses do not last forever," she said softly. "No," Ethan replied, sliding an arm around her shoulders. "But love can. You want to stay seeing the world in the world in the world." She leaned against him, smiling through the shimmer of tears. "From contract to commitment," she whispered. He kissed her forehead, his voice a murmur against her hair. "From strangers to forever." Outside, the city hummed, alive with the sound of new beginnings. And for Emily Hart and Ethan Ward, the story that had started with a contract ended not in signatures, but in something far stronger: truth, forgiveness, and a love that finally belonged to no one but them.